The game of the week took place at a chess camp that was held at Madison School a couple of years ago between two decent players, and there's a lot of things that you'll be able to see and learn from in this game. And I'll talk about some of the different things that we've talked about during our chess club meetings, and hopefully it will help you to decide how to develop your pieces in chess and how to play the game. The game starts off with white moving their pawn up 2 squares, the e pawn, which is a fantastic opening for white, and it's the opening that I encourage the chess players to start off with and to become familiar with. Black develops a knight on c6. I encourage black, if white moves the pawn up 2, I encourage black to move their pawn up 2. It's still early in the game, not a huge deal yet, but again, I just like to teach basic principles of opening. White then develops the knight on the second move, which is fantastic. That's usually how I start my chess games, is with those 2 moves. White moves a pawn up 1. Moving it up 2 would have been a little bit better, but it's still pretty early in the game. White then develops the other knight, and I talked about the kinds of things that you need to do during the opening of a game, and it doesn't really necessarily matter what order those moves are made in as long as they get done. So moving the knight to c3 is a fine third move, and you can see now white has a lot of pressure here on the central 4 squares, which is what you try to do and what you want to do at the beginning of a chess game. On black's third move, black starts an attack, and now white has to stop and think, what's the threat? And here, black's pawn could take white's pawn, and white could just recapture with the knight. So it'd be 1 point to 1. White can also think, if they capture the pawn, then black can return the capture with another pawn. So again, it's 1 to 1, not a real strong threat, and white decides to ignore it. White develops a bishop, and I really like the way white has started this game. Moved up the e pawn up 2, moved both knights, and has moved the bishop. That's a great way to start off a chess game. White decides to attack, or black decides to attack white again with another pawn move. And so white has to ask themselves again, what is the threat? Now if you look here at the mentor lines, again, the mentor lines you can find by going up to the top of the screen, clicking the mentor button, and then going to where it says mentor lines and clicking that. And I like to use my top 5 moves. I see there's 4 right now, but there. Now we have our top 5 moves. And if you look, the number 1 move, oh, and by the way, if the score is positive, it means that white is ahead. And if the score is negative, then black is ahead. So there's only 1 move that white can make that will keep white positive, and that is for the bishop to take the knight at c6 and put them in check. If white takes the knight, they earn 3 points, but they're going to lose their bishop again, and then the score will be tied 3 to 3. And again, it's personal preference. It's still early in the game, and there's a lot that can happen. White prefers not to take that piece, but to back off. So white decides to move their piece to e2. And you can see that the score is now negative, so black is ahead. Black captures the pawn. They're ahead 1 to nothing. But white easily captures the pawn back. And the score is now 1 to 1, basically tied. You can see from the mentor lines, black is slightly ahead, but really not enough. Well, now it's saying that white is ahead. So, the more you let the computer think, the more of an exact answer you're going to get as far as who's ahead. Black puts another attack on white again. I encourage chess players not to move their pawns too much in the opening. So far, black has done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawn moves in the opening. And pawns are pretty weak pieces. And You really shouldn't move a pawn unless if you have a really good reason to do so. It's true that the black pawn is chasing off the white knight here, but later on in the game, black's kind of opening up the king to some later on attacks. Again, it's personal preference. If you're comfortable playing a chess game with your king in the middle and the pawns moved a lot, then you can do that. But I encourage chess players to try to keep these pawns moved as little as possible. And as you can see, White has only made one pawn move in this game, and that's it. White retreats the knight, and again, what's the threat? Letter F is flee, so go away. And you can see that black still has the advantage, but it's very, very slight. It's not really a whole lot to make a huge difference, especially this early in the game. You can see black makes another pawn move. White castles, which is a great developing move. So far, white has done all of the things that I encourage white to do in developing. You know, this bishop's not in the greatest place. I don't think I would have moved my bishop. Sorry if I said that wrong. I don't think I would have moved my bishop all the way back here, but that's just what white wanted to do. I probably would have moved it right here. And then if black would have moved the pawn there, I would just kind of hide the rook in this little corner right here, or this little square. But anyway, so castling is a good idea. Black now does another attack, and you can see from the score, the best thing for white to do is to put the knight on e1, which really is not a very good looking place to be. But this white knight is in a lot of trouble. And if you look at all the other moves, you know, whatever white decides to do, if it's not going to e1, black's going to be ahead by more than a point. And white decides to move there, and now black gets a knight for free. And the score is now 4-1 if you look at pieces. Now, if you look here at the mentor lines, it says that black is only ahead by 1.7. But if we look at the pieces, it's 4. And the reason why Chessmaster is not saying that black is ahead by 4 is because black has made so many pawn moves and has opened up the center of the board, and black doesn't have a chance to castle anytime soon. So yes, black is ahead, but white's position here is pretty solid, and it's going to be a lot harder for black to break into where the king is than it is for white to start attacking black. So again, that's why the score is not 4 here, but only 1.8. Also, one thing I want to point out, and I tell a lot of the advanced players this, is look out for X-ray attacks. An X-ray attack is if you imagine that your pieces can see through other pieces, like here. If this bishop sees through this pawn, it has an attack on the queen. And a lot of chess players don't notice their opponent's X-ray attacks and don't notice them, or they forget about them. And white is going to move their pawn a little bit later on in the game to expose this X-ray attack, and black's not going to notice it, and white is going to take their queen for free. And white goes on to win the game. So when you're playing, look for those little surprise X-ray attacks, because they're really, really good when they work the way they're supposed to. White moves the rook over, and if you look, another X-ray attack against the king. And so white is going to use this X-ray attack on the king and this X-ray attack on the queen in this game. Black's ahead by 2 points, but white has some surprises. Black makes a pretty bad move right there. You can see that if I go back, black is ahead by 2 points, but by this one move, white suddenly has the lead again. And if you're curious to find out why certain moves are the way they are, or what would happen in different positions, you can take these games and pause them, or even plug them into your own computers at home and try out some of these different moves to see what would happen. I'm going to close this segment and go on to part 2.